Hi, and welcome to this episode on emotional fluency and fluidity. Emotions are my jam. They're totally my jam. So I'm really excited to get into this. And a few episodes ago, I talked about uncolonizing relationships, and now we're going to get into uncolonizing the body mind, specifically around emotions. And I'm recording this on the first day of Mercury in retrograde in May 2022. And, retrogrades, like people tend to fear them because, it's a time of travel, communication, and technological mishaps. But the point really is to is to slow your roll and ground in what's truly important. It's a time to process emotional material that arises in order to access clarity by coming home to yourself in deeper ways, right? Like it's a time to clean up the debris, right? Get your broom, right? Get your mopping materials to sweep up some of the emotions. So before I get into the topic, I want to let you know that my membership collective, Revolucionary Rompereglas, is open to new members all the time. And through the end of the year, you'll have the opportunity to come in and lock in a membership price of $79.99 each month per month through the end of the year, because at the beginning of next year, the price is going to go up significantly because I am going to be running a mastermind in there. So the mastermind is already in beta mode, and I'm going to run it again next year at a higher price. So for this lower monthly investment, you get 2 somatic group coaching calls a month centered around emotional fluency, embodying truth, boundaries, and energetic authority. You also get 2 monthly witches and bitches book coven calls, right? That's our reading group, our book club. You get a library of exercises, meditations, and recordings of the calls that we have in the community. And you get a monthly full moon movement event where we practice emotional release work using our sexual energy and turn on. So that's really, really fun. And of course, there's coursework on boundaries. There's my course Root, which is the foundations of embodied sovereignty, as well as the curriculum Sovereign that we run on a monthly basis. So people come into the community because they want to heal their intimacy wounds. They want to learn nervous system regulation. They want to navigate their fear narratives and connect more deeply to their sexuality, practice pleasure, expand their emotional fluency, and embody their magic, all of which supports a deeper sense of safety and trust in their own bodies, with themselves as leaders, with the people they love, and with their businesses. So it's a place for healers, deep feelers. And, as you know, safety and trust is the basis of all creative expression. And I've included the link to the community in the show notes, but if you have questions about whether it's a good fit for you, you can get on a free 30-minute curiosity call with me, and we can talk about whether it's aligned fit for you, for where you are right now in your life. All right, so let's get into it. So as I've mentioned in previous episodes of the podcast, the embodiment of sovereignty has many facets, including emotional, of course, spiritual, sexual, mental, and physical, all of which make up your erotic life force, right? Your creative energy, sexual energy. And just for today, we're going to focus on the emotional sovereignty piece, which includes being in full command of your emotions, but also being able to express the full range of your emotions, being able to navigate the landscape of your emotional terrain. And that means having all of the highs and lows of your emotional world. Because as you know, you've probably heard this before, you can't have this really expansive high, like your profound joy, if you don't also access the deep pain, right? You can't just have the quote unquote good emotions, right? You need to have the full range of expression to really be fully alive. And what I find in my work, because we experience trauma, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, is that most people operate within a safe range of emotional expression, right? And when I mean safe range, I mean safe to their nervous system, what has been taught to you as safe, which is pretty constricted and limited. And I'm sharing all of this with you from a place of experience. Like I also lived in that safe constricted and limited space. In fact, I feel like my range was very small despite all of the big emotions that were happening internally. My expression was really limited. And like most people, and like most people from my generation and above, I didn't grow up in an environment where it was safe for me to express my feelings, my emotions. And I was a highly sensitive person with nowhere to put my inner experiences, nowhere to express them. Like there wasn't a safe place for me to sort of bring it out. And I experienced what most big feelers experience growing up, which is having their feelings made wrong or having their experiences gaslit. And I did what most people do, which is I put my emotions away. I numbed them. I buried them. I bypassed them. I projected them out towards the people that I loved, right? This is what we do with them. When we can't hold them in our bodies, there's nowhere for them to go. Either we put them in a tight little box or we sort of explode them outward. And it wasn't until I got into my somatic training that I really began to give give my emotions room to be fully expressed and felt all the way. I began to understand myself through my emotions, and I unwound stuck emotions from my emotional body and therefore my nervous system. So when I began to do that, I released trauma from my system, which led to a more subtle awareness of emotions. So I was able to be more self-connected, and I was picking up on like the nuances that allowed me to make more to make decisions about how it was to be in the world, um, like from a place of clarity, from a place of alignment with my values and in integrity with myself, i.e. not betraying myself. And I also, like, by releasing trauma through my system, by expressing emotion, my nervous system calmed down. Like it was just really profound release work. And I was able to feel emotions arise before they got too big to be reactive, right? Because when we numb the emotions, we numb the more subtle sensations. And so we don't detect when they're starting to ramp up. We just feel them when they get really big, and then it's too late. So it allowed me to insert that critical pause, that space in between that allows you to name what's arising before it takes command, before it takes hold of the wheel and gets really messy, right? Where we experience ruptures in our relationship. So it allowed me to be more mindful, more conscious about my interactions personally and professionally. So your body is, generally speaking, a manifestation of your emotional state. You have life experiences, you experience trauma in your life. It really doesn't matter where you come from or how good the parenting you received is. There is, to some degree, some trauma that you experience. And all of these events and life experiences are associated with emotion that want to be expressed or discharged from the body at the time, but for various reasons, right? Usually overwhelm, you may not express these emotions and they get stored or suppressed in your body as a source of stress, right? And this source of stress can be ancestral or epigenetic in nature. It can be collective trauma. It can be personal trauma. So these are the different sources of trauma that can come into a body system. So the body compensates for a period of time until it can't anymore. So your emotional cup, your internal emotional cup starts to fill up, and then it spills over. And this is where your body will manifest physical, mental, and behavioral issues, right? So that can look like depression, that can look like anxiety, that can look like addictions. It can look like chronic illness, hello, and it can look like a constant state of overwhelm. And the way that it usually manifests, the way that, we really start to notice it is in the ways that it spills out onto the people closest to us, right? When we're discharging onto the people that we love. And the release of emotions requires just time and space to be expressed, right? It doesn't need a lot of time and it doesn't need a lot of space, but the two main reasons we tend not to do it is because it's inconvenient, right? We fear falling apart, losing control, and not being able to put ourselves back together in order to function in our lives. And the other piece, the other reason why we don't express our emotions or create the space is because we don't necessarily know how to express it. This is not a skill that most of us learn growing up. And because we don't know it, we're not comfortable doing it, we tend to avoid it. We push it to the side to the point where we can't access it anymore. And we need to nudge it out in order for it to feel comfortable expressing. And the way to nudge it, the way to open up a space for it, like a doorway, is by creating structure. And at the end of the episode, or towards the end of the episode, rather, I'm going to give some examples of what some of those structures and practices are. So offering structure is creating some yang so that the yin can flow. The yin is the emotional energy. So the structure is the riverbank, and the emotions, the yang energy, is the water. So what you're doing is creating internal balance through the expression of emotions by creating these safe spaces for emotions to be expressed. So what's required? Your full permission and your full commitment and permission giving. You know, what often happens is that when we approach a big emotion, right, we start to go in, and then the nervous system goes, this is really dangerous, don't do it. And we back off because we fear looking weird. We fear experiencing overwhelm, or we fear falling apart. And the reason for that is cultural. It's also personal trauma. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the cultural aspects of emotion and how our relationship to emotion. And then I'll share some of the philosophical underpinnings of emotional fluidity, like things like mindset shifts that will help you lean into and commit to emotions, like the permission giving piece. And then I'm going to offer the somatic tools, the practices, the structure for emotional processing, just in time for the retrograde. So first, emotions and culture. So through the internalization of white culture, right, white supremacist culture, and the systems of oppression it underwrites, we learn to suppress emotions. And when I say like white culture, I mean like Protestant, Victorian, sort of this emotionally constricted kind of way of being that is often steeped in religiosity. And we learn to suppress emotions, especially emotions such as anger, shame, fear, and grief that have been made wrong through religious conditioning. And some people call these dark or negative emotions, but part of our conditioning is labeling some emotions good and others bad. So we're, obviously we develop a relationship of attachment and aversion, attachment to what is good and aversion to what's bad. And so these are the binary splits in our nervous system. So with regard to feeling emotions, we are designed, right? Our human makeup, like our capacity, our natural gifts as humans, as animal beings, is to feel emotions through the body. Your body is a healing machine. Your body is not designed to hold on to, suppress, or disconnect from any emotions. And when we do, we start to experience that depression and anxiety, and sometimes those physical illnesses I was naming earlier, those mystery illnesses, for example. And the reason, again, we don't allow ourselves to feel emotions is because we fear losing control. We fear being overtaken by feeling. And that fear is part of our conditioning. And oftentimes, like as children, we do have experiences where we go so deep into a feeling before we really have the capacity to bring ourselves back and to regulate ourselves, because that's what we're learning. That's the task that we're learning. And sometimes our parents aren't sufficiently regulated themselves to help us get out of those overwhelming emotions. And that experience of overwhelm is terrorizing as a kid. And so that is part of what many of us hold in our bodies, like, oh, if I go so deep into this, I'm not going to be able to get myself out. And the truth is that even if you do get flooded as an adult, you do have the ego capacity now to get unstuck, to move through it completely. Um, so you're able now to lose control. Let's say if you lose control, to let it flow through you by surrendering to it fully, and you won't die, right? Even if your nervous system is telling you, oh, this is too much, you're going to die, you won't. So what you had to repress as a child in order to survive, or to not feel overwhelmed because it was threatening to your survival in some way, you can feel now. You do have the ego strength now, and your nervous system is going to sound the alarm, right? It's going to go into freeze mode. You're going to feel that right, that stuckness. But the truth is that you survived the worst already, and that you can continue to trust that you'll be okay. So emotions are very wise. Each emotion is an experience and an expression of your humanity. And there are portals into spiritual lessons, into knowing yourself more deeply. I believe that experiencing your emotions is medicine, right? There's wisdom. You by moving it through your system, by composting it, by digesting it, metabolizing it, you gain part of yourself each time with each emotion. And so I want to speak a little bit to emotional range, as I was saying earlier in the episode. So because of the way that we're raised, we operate within a pretty restricted range of emotional expression. When you think about children, you think of them having this capacity to scream at the top of their lungs when they're upset or angry, or cry the biggest crocodile tears when they're sad, right? They just go to everything and they go deeply. And then, a minute later, they're laughing again. It's like they're all over the place emotionally. They're fluid, right? They just move from one emotion to the next, and there's another wave, and there's another wave of something else. And so, don't you ever wonder where that capacity goes to be fluid? And ever wonder what happens to that unexpressed energy? And ever wonder why, as adults, we become so depressed and anxious? A lot of anxiety from the somatic energetic lens is in part due to the unexpressed emotion. And these emotions become exiled and disowned, and we develop that negative relationship to anger. For example, we make it wrong, especially spiritual folks. We circumvent anger to get to like we circumvent anger to get to forgiveness or sadness or even compersion. Let's say we don't let ourselves have the full range. And we also learn in our childhoods that we can't bring it fully, because if we do, we'll lose a connection. Like, how many of us have experienced when we're angry at a parent, for example, the parent turns away, they get angry at us, and the connection gets lost. There's a rupture in the attachment system, right? So we learned, oh, I can't bring my full anger, because when I bring my full anger, people leave. We learned that it's culturally unacceptable, that it's punishable, or that it's shameful. And even with my own children, I had to teach them how to maintain a connection to their emotions and how to move the emotions through their bodies. Because, we don't, this is not, it's interesting, because I thought it would be natural for them to maintain it, but they would have clearly lost that ability just through societal conditioning, because it's not something, this animal self is not something that we easily hold on to. So I'm going to share some philosophical underpinnings, like the mindset shifts that will help you engage fully and give yourself permission to feel deeply and to feel all the way through. So the first of the four philosophies or the ideas are that emotions are simply energy. Like one of the biggest gifts I learned in my training was to treat all emotion equally and to experience pleasure through the expression of them. So anger is energy, sadness is energy, grief is energy, joy is energy, right? It's neutral. And, you know, really treating emotions as a human experience. And when you treat emotions as a human experience, you are more willing to allow them to flow through you. There isn't a judgment around it. Your relationship becomes one of just observation, just neutral observation versus judgment. Like, oh, why are you feeling this anger? You shouldn't be sad. And then you rationalize your way out of it. Instead, you're just like, I'm feeling sad right now. What do I need to do to move it? It's just by framing it in a more neutral way, it allows you to answer a different question and to ask for what you need in that moment. So the second mindset shift is to welcome your emotions, like whatever is arising, to meet it with approval. So approval is really the relationship that you have with your emotions, right? So you're going to want to be excited about whatever's arising. You're going to be welcoming, and you're going to meet it with compassion. And maybe you can even allow yourself to get turned on by your emotions. Like I was saying earlier, it's about like really experiencing the pleasure of expression. So you're going to get turned on by your emotions. You're going to get turned on by your grief. Grief is hot, right? You're going to check your narratives around, oh, I'm so weak and pathetic because I'm sad. No, you're going to get turned on by your sadness. You're going to get turned on by your rage. Rage is sexy. Let it move, right? And you're going to you can move it with your sexuality. And this is something that I'm going to talk about in a minute with the practices. So you're going to be in radical approval of whatever is arising. And this supports the dismantling of shame and supports the integration, right? From the place of that binary split of right or wrong, good, evil, right? All, nothing. It supports the integration and the fluidity of being able to like, oh yeah, I get to move from one emotion to another and everything's okay and everything's right. So, and we don't make it mean anything. It's just like, I'm just having an experience, right? It doesn't mean like, oh, I'm a sad sap or I'm this or I'm that. No, it just needs to move. We're just gonna pay attention to it enough to move the energy of it. So the third mindset shift is getting into the space of like the willingness to feel it all. When you're willing to feel everything, it makes room for you to be turned on by your emotions, regardless of what they are, because we're so programmed to push away what we don't want and to pull towards us what we do want. This dissolves the binary, as I was saying before, of the good and bad emotions. And willingness is about embodying the mindset of yes to everything without having some story or judgment woven around it. The yes gives you permission to feel deeply and to feel all the way through, right? And just thinking about this from an embodied sense, your will center lives behind your heart. So it's about the intention to feel, right? The intention and willingness to feel. So the fourth mindset shift is celebrating your messy emotions helps build your emotional receptivity. So when you approve of your emotions, regardless of what they are, you dissolve your shame and open up your capacity to receive more of your energy, receive fulfillment. That means you're able to hold a bigger space for other people as a leader, whether your leadership happens in your business as a healer, as a coach, or as a parent with your own children, or even in your relationship with a partner or partners. So hopefully those are helpful. I'm going to review them now. Like the mindset shifts are: emotions are just energy, welcome everything with approval, be willing to feel it all and get turned on by it. And the fourth one is celebrate your messy emotions. Celebrating your messy emotions helps you build your emotional receptivity. So finally, we're going to get into the somatic tools for emotional processing. So the easiest one to access, and one that really doesn't take a long time at all, is what comes from Mama Gina's School of Womanly Arts, I think it was called, and that's swamping. And this is what I do in my membership community, where we do, we go under the full moon and we'd have this like movement release event. We put on sensual music, we move our rage and grief. And this enables you to use your sexual energy in the piece around pleasure that activates the soothing mechanism in your nervous system, and it helps regulate your emotions as you're going deep into the emotions. So it has like a nice balancing effect. So from the place of being afraid that if you engage the difficult emotions from, that, and you won't be able to get out of them, that you'll get flooded, this helps to soothe and regulate at the same time as you're feeling deeply. So you won't get stuck in them. In other words, like you'll be moving to your sensual energy, you'll still feel good at the same time as you're feeling like bad and difficult emotions. So this is a place where you get to change the narrative around grief being like, oh, pathetic emotion, to, ooh, grief is sexy, rage is powerful, yes, let me feel it. Like it helps us change the story and uncolonize our relationship, our narratives to emotion. So, and then there's like just simply moving the energy. This can happen in lots of different ways, and again, this also doesn't take up a lot of time. When you move the energy, I often have people, when I'm coaching them or when I'm mentoring them, just moving the energy is to bring it into expression, right? And sometimes the body wants to bring it into expression through movement. And that means hitting a pillow, or maybe twisting a towel, or, sometimes I pound on a mattress. Like sometimes I pound with my arms and legs on a mattress. That's how we learn to do it in our training, to like have a full-on tantrum. But the important part is not to just do the movement, but to really engage the emotion, to really allow yourself to drop in and then move. Sometimes it looks like screaming in your car, like letting yourself just like, oh God, I'm so frustrated, to really let it out. There was something else I wanted to say around that, moving the energy. Yes, bringing it into expression, right? Like a lot of people in the somatic world really is, they're about feeling it. The way that I work is around also bringing it into expression, is around release. And you can do both, right? Some people need a lot of expression. Some people are really good just feeling it. But the expression piece, I think, is important because we are expressive beings. As children, we don't hold anything back. We just like, we feel something and it's coming out, And so I feel like when we bring it into expression, we can find that happy medium where we're able to like calibrate our systems into like, okay, how much do I want to bring out? How it allows us to hold that bigger internal space. I feel like for me, it was necessary to, because I'm a very expressive person, I needed to bring it into expression in order to be able to calibrate internally and to balance myself internally. So the last tool, the somatic tool that I want to share with you for your emotional leadership, emotional fluidity and fluency, is the emotional release three-step emotional release process. And I know Dr. Jin Ong talked about this on the podcast, I think in season 1. So this is a verbal dialogue process split into 3 parts. There's the one-way conversation where you allow, an aspect of yourself, maybe your child self, to be like to be nasty, to be in the story, to be in their darkness, their blame, to spew it all out without filtering it. And then you come into a two-way conversation where you listen to the person that you have a grievance with. This is something that you can do on your own, or you can do with a witness or a mentor. This is something that I do in my practice. So you open your heart to hearing the other person that is not in the room with you, but that you are speaking for the other person you have the grievance with. You open your heart and you listen with compassion. And you may feel triggered in the process, but it really is about having them provide the excuses to why they couldn't show up for you in the way that you needed. And then the third step is the inner child conversation, where you, as the adult self, stand in as the fairy godparent, as the attuned parent, as the caring, the loving caregiver that meets yourself exactly in the way that you needed to be met. And this 3-step process is really, really powerful because it allows you to move through the whole cycle of emotional release. And this has been, it's been shown to be like, the outcomes have been like releasing trauma from the body, especially if you have, like, let's say you have a parent that is no longer alive. You can still have healing without the person being present, right? It allows you to create like a safe container where you can have your grievances, where you can work out the relationship without having it be with that person. And you may or may not choose to do that at a later time. Anyway, this is sort of where I'm going to end this episode. And, the reason why I am talking about the emotional fluency and fluidity is because it's like, as leaders, right? Whether you're a coach, whether you're a parent, it's like, we need to be able to hold that internal space for our emotions in order to be fully alive and to be fully present in this world. And it is through emotions that we learn about ourselves, that we gain clarity, and we stay in touch with that divine and messy human within. So let me know what you think about the episode. Leave me comments if you're watching on the YouTube channel, and I'll see you on the next episode.